Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Carter with Flower Hill Institute, along with Chris Roper, and we're going to give it just a minute for folks to come out of the waiting room and into the session, and then we'll get started. So we'll get going here in about 30 seconds or so. Hmm. All right, I think we got most of the folks coming in. We'll probably have a few more join us, but we appreciate all of those of you that are with us this afternoon. We're really pleased with this. So, as I mentioned, I'm Dave Carter. Chris Roper and I are the two regional directors for the Flower Hill Institute, uh, native-led nonprofit out of New Mexico that's has the agreement with USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service to coordinate the technical assistance network that AMS put together to support smaller meat and poultry processors. And as we speak, many processors are getting notified about some potential grant awards. And as with most of the grants that USDA has been putting out over the last couple of years to support a more resilient, diverse, and equitable meat processing system, they're not providing 100%. There's, they give you a portion of the money, and then you have to have that cash um, match for the other part. And so I know there are many processors out there right now that are saying, okay, how do I put together my financial stack? And traditionally, there have been, lenders. There's the traditional lenders in the ag space. There's USDA programs, which we'll touch on here in a couple of weeks. But there's also been the emergence of some innovative alternative funding systems, and we're going to touch on that this afternoon. So before we get started with our two subject experts here, just two things. Number one, this is being recorded. And so it will be put onto the Flower Hill website. So it can be downloaded. You can watch it again. You can download it. If somebody wasn't able to make this, they can watch it. We will also have an FAQ document to accompany it here in a couple of weeks when we get the time to put one together. And then also, as a participant, you can type in questions in either the Q&A or the chat. Uh, Shelby White, who is sort of the wizard behind the screen for this, she'll be helping us monitor that. And so, type in your questions, and as we go along, we certainly want to answer as many of them as we can. Also, after this, you will be getting a two-question survey. Simply, um, what what did you like or what did you think of this roundtable? And secondly, what are some suggestions for some topics that we should cover? So with that, I'm going to um, introduce our panelists. We're pleased to have um, Janie Hip, who is the CEO of the Native Agriculture Financial Services. I'll let Janie introduce herself in a minute. And we're also pleased to have Alyssa Welker, who's with Steward. I call it Steward Capital, but they say Steward Funding Regenerative Agriculture. So, Chris, before we have them introduce themselves, anything you want to add as we kick this off?
Yeah, real quick. It's a great week. It's a great week for grant applicants. Hopefully many of you are on the call, are getting notified of potential awards. And even for Janie and Alyssa's information, the Indigenous Animals Grant Awards came out last week. So that was a grant that we've been waiting to hear on, and happy to see the awards come out for that. Dave mentioned some of the awards that are coming out right now. The MPET Phase 2 awards, they're being announced, and folks are being contacted right now to potentially do, deeper dives into their grant, or maybe, looking at finances or NEPA reviews or whatever. And also the MCAP grant. So we're hearing of some awards that are taking place on the MCAP grant. So the timing of this discussion is wonderful. And Dave mentioned, folks are thinking about where they're going to come up with their matches. They're thinking about, well, maybe I priced this grant a year ago, and now we've seen some inflation or we've seen prices change. where am I going to get the other capital to finish out my project? Or maybe I want to do more. How can I pair up other finances with a grant award I just received? So, our topic is very timely, and it worked out perfect for us this time. Dave did a webinar a week or two ago on leasing. So that one kind of is in conjunction with this on finance, a little bit different. So we've opted to break out a few different subjects, all tied to financing, of course. But we're happy to see everyone on the call, and please let us know if you have any questions. Type them into the chat, and we'll try to make sure and get to everybody before the end of the discussion. So thank you all for being here.
And just as a point of clarification, don't type into the chat or the Q&A, am I getting one of those calls? Because
we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah. And the processors, the folks that are getting those calls, are, there's some things that they have to go through before any public announcement is made. But we're really glad to see it starting to move. So let's get right to experts here. So, Janie, introduce yourself to the folks.
It would help if I came off of mute. So thanks, and hi everybody. It's really great to see a whole lot of dots out there, and also some familiar faces. I'm Janie Hipp. I am a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation. I am right now sitting outside of my new offices in Fayetteville, Arkansas, with the Native Agriculture Financial Services. We're a new entity that sprang from some support that the Native American Agriculture Fund put on the ground to help give us life, if you will. And many of you probably know me from, I don't know, Dave and Chris, hanging around in this space for 40 years. Some of you may not know me from 40 years ago, but I'm an agricultural lawyer by training. I've been doing agricultural law and up to my eyeballs with producers, and by association with processors and all along the food chain for many, many, many decades, and have helped to stand up some processing plants as well, and to literally kind of be at the table when folks are discussing how to put these things together. And yes, we got so in the weeds, Chris, together at one point that we were in a room writing HACCP plans. So, I've seen it all from soup to nuts, but I loved this topic, and I love being able to be in this new role, and helping folks think through this, and think through, as Alyssa and I've been talking recently, thinking through how to be creative in the financing of these processing plants, no matter what it is, no matter whether it's meat, that's what we're talking about today, meat and poultry, but the same principles, I would say, Alyssa, apply if you're talking about grains or specialty crops or fruit and vegetables or seafood. It really doesn't matter. It's kind of the same kind of topical areas you really need to put your head around when you're developing financing for a project or trying to figure out how to stand it up and get it moving and keep it going. So anyway, it's great to see you all. I'm going to be quiet now, and Alyssa can jump in here and introduce herself, and we'll just kind of go from there, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Janie. And Alyssa, yeah, tell us about your 40 years in agriculture.
Yeah, I do not have 40 years. It's been so wonderful to very excited to be a part of this panel and learn. Janie and we've become fast friends. I've heard she's willing to dive into everything but writing more HACCP plans. So don't call Janie for that. But anything else, and I'm sure she could point you to a good person. But yeah, my name is Alyssa Welker. I'm with Steward. Dave, Steward Lending, Steward Holding, Steward Capital. We have all sorts of entities, so you can many different names, but Steward is basically for short. My background, I've worked in agriculture on the grain side, as well as have been at Steward for the past 3.5 years, working with our producers, entrepreneurs, business owners. We are a non-bank financial institution, basically an alternative lender that's working with regenerative and sustainable agricultural projects, all the way from the ranchers and the producers, all the way up the supply chain to CPG companies, and that includes, in the middlemen, the processors, and really helping to get regenerative, sustainable, rebuilding local and regional food systems, and have worked on a couple of meat processing projects as well as grain processing. And Steward, we're a lender, we're providing debt capital, but we're also very much have seen the need that you got to pull in a lot of different pieces and get really creative when it comes to actually getting one of these projects built, but then also operational. It's not as easy as just, okay, you have the MPEP grant and then a loan. There's typically some more capital that's needed, whether it be, a syndicated equity structure or mezzanine debt or other grants. And Steward, we're kind of basically working with folks to help get creative, and kind of be partners in helping to get these projects built and kind of rebuild regional and local food system infrastructure.
Great. And I want to circle back to that in a minute. But first of all, just a little explanation, since this title is, alternative things. How does, let me start off with you, Alyssa. How does Steward differ from a traditional lender?
Yeah, so because we're a non-bank financial institution, we kind of make our own rules in a way in terms of our credit limits, like what we need to see. We are also, we're a lender, but we're also kind of helping to think about the bigger capital stack. So that's pretty different than, let's say, if you go to a bank, they're typically going to look at, okay, what lending programs can we offer, but leave the rest to you in terms of where does the rest of the money come from. So definitely different in that sense of kind of thinking holistically about a project. As well as Steward is quite different in terms of where our money actually comes from. So Steward is the lender, the underwriter, we're the loan servicer, but once we actually approve a loan, Steward has built basically a network of thousands of lenders across the country. So these are individuals like you and me. Some folks are putting in $100 into a loan, all the way up to $1 million or $100,000. And so basically many of our loans are funded via participated loan structures. So basically pairing people that are in cities or passionate about agriculture, but don't own farms themselves with the farmers, ranchers, processors that need the capital. So we're doing some kind of direct, basically fundraising for the loans via these participated loan structures. We're certainly tapping into other programs as well. The BNI Guaranteed Loan Program, through some partner lenders and kind of some of the more traditional means. But yeah, we definitely get creative in not just how we structure the capital stack, but also where our capital comes from, which enables us to be a bit more flexible, and kind of be with the borrower client all the way through.
Yeah, that's all great. If I can add real quick, Dave, too, one of the things, and Janie and I worked together on a project several years back, but when we look at, and we have several tribal processors on our call today, and we thank you all for joining us. So that a lot of our history and a lot of our logic for putting these finance roundtable discussions together is the need to become creative. If you're sitting on tribal land, you have some restrictions possibly that you have to deal with, or maybe a traditional bank may not want to deal with your project because of the restrictions on your property. My past and the things that I've dealt with in the past have led me to find alternative financing opportunities. And when you look at leasing, you look at lease buybacks, you look at non-conventional financing, it can not only work for tribes and tribal projects, but it can work on other small business projects as well. And that's why Dave and I wanted to make sure that we help share these opportunities with everyone, and to be sure that you reach out and ask questions during this call and during these discussions. If you have a particular situation that we need to talk about offline, we're happy to do that as well. but just know that we've pooled together a group of experts, and some of them who we've worked with in the past, to help make projects happen in a non-conventional way. It's very easy for each and every one of us to go down to the local bank and talk to that banker, but they all have restrictions. And as Alyssa mentioned, every lender you come across will have some type of restriction that we have to deal with. So we have to understand that and learn how to deal with that, versus just saying, no, they won't work with me, so I can't do my project. You just have to find out where the yes is. You're gonna hear no a lot, especially if you're a small business owner and you're trying to build a business. Know that, accept that, and move on to the next person. So let's figure out how to creatively get your projects put together. So, Janie.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Creatively. And Janie, you've been creative all through your career. So talk about, I know that Native American Financial Services is part of Farm Credit System, but it's kind of a new
Yeah, and
part. So,
Dave,
yeah.
I'm going to jump in here and kind of build on what Alyssa and Chris were saying too. Native Ag Financial Services is an other financing institution within the Farm Credit System. And the Farm Credit System is not the Farm Service Agency at USDA, which is a federal agency. The Farm Credit System is a system of lending institutions that were chartered by Congress, 1916. They've been around for a very long time. They are made up of lending cooperatives all around the country, which are, in their terminology, farm credit associations. Those are, top to bottom, side to side lending cooperatives. They're farmer-owned cooperative lenders. So there's that. But then within that farm credit system is funding banks that have regional areas that they serve as a funneling mechanism, I suppose you could say, of funneling money into that region through those farm credit association entities that are closer to the ground, closer to where you are. Then there is Farmer Mac, which is the secondary market, and they handle that sort of piece of the puzzle, if you will. But the Farm Credit System has its own regulator, and it is not the regular banking regulators. It is the Farm Credit Administration, and that was put in place by Congress on purpose, because the Farm Credit System writ large can only lend in agriculture, which includes processing, and rural America. And so years ago, I started talking with folks across the leadership in farm credit, sort of writ large across the country, just trying to unpack, what can we do better? They've had native producers, they've had, all sorts of producers all over the country that have been borrowers of theirs for quite some time. They've invested in infrastructure in rural communities and processing and all sorts of value-added things. But my conversation with them always was, what can we do together to reach people that are extremely difficult to reach with financing? And so we started batting around this idea of creating an other financing institution, which is actually authorized under law for them to have, but they've never had one that sits in this kind of unique space. So Dave, I call us a unicorn within a unicorn because the Farm Credit System is kind of a unicorn. It's an amazing infrastructure that a lot of people literally just kind of drive by it and not really sure how it's structured. But they do processing loans, and they have the authority to do that. The question always is, where are they? And how can they kind of come in there and be a part of this? The other financing institution that Native Ag Financial Services is going to sit as a bridge between these projects that we're talking about today and producers, just random producers and fishers and forest people, you name it. They have a broad eligibility, definition of who can be a borrower. It's not just cows and plows. It is folks who have stands of timber. It's folks who fish, the whole 9 yards. But we see our role as a bridge. And that's why I've been so excited about getting to know Alyssa, because I see them as a bridge also. A bridge and a door that folks can walk in and literally not get exasperated, but basically get creative about where we find folks who can participate in the financing structure that can sit up underneath these processing capacities that we're all trying to build. You know, the reality, Dave, and you've been working on this a long time, you know, is COVID and the pandemic showed us we got some brittleness, right, in the supply chain. And unless we build out this processing infrastructure, we're going to keep having the brittleness. So the reality is I've been around producers for 40 years who have said, we just got to build this other piece of the puzzle. It's not enough for us to support each other on the farm and ranch and in the forest and, you know, in our boats. We got to do that other step that takes us into the marketplace if we want to value add. And so, you know, that's what we're already being, but we can show up and be a participating lender with Alyssa. We've already talked about that. How can we actually work on projects together? Or we can turn around and look at the rest of the farm credit system and pick up the phone and call the Farm Credit Association bank that's 2 states over and give them a holler and say, we got a really fantastic project here. You want to help? Do you want to be involved in this? The way we're structured is as a 501c3. So we are going to have 1 foot in that system, of the farm credit system, in that capital pool, if you will. But we're also going to have another foot that makes us look a little bit like Alyssa and Stewart, right? And so that's why I say we're a unicorn. and we're proud of that, because I think that's honestly, Dave and Chris, that's what we all need right now. Is we need a bunch of unicorns who are very creative, who can pull the threads together and get these projects stood up and operating and solid. And to me, that's kind of in a nutshell of what we're all about and what we see on the horizon for us. But just because you're not native, right, or not involved with a tribal government, that doesn't mean we can't work with you, because we've got a lot of projects. And Chris, I see you nodding your head. There's a lot of projects right now that tribes are thinking about that are going to rely on non-native livestock to be a part of it. I mean, we're all in this together, y'all.
Yeah, I was just
That's the way I feel about it.
You just answered the question that Catherine Bedell posed was, yeah, can you work with non-native projects?
Yes,
And that's great.
For us,
Go ahead,
we've
Chris.
been talking to our board, and our board is of a mind that if it assists Native communities and Native agriculture, then why wouldn't we? We are all in this together, you all. And we've got to, our Native producers depend on markets and market access just like everybody else. So it just doesn't make any sense for us to all dance on the head of one pin. We need to actually figure out how to collaboratively work with each other to make this infrastructure piece as strong as it can possibly be to benefit all of us.
Yeah, I was just going to add too, with all the folks that are on the call today, Janie and Alyssa, I mean, you should know, I mean, we have folks from all over the United States. You know, I see projects in Washington, Oregon, Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. I mean, we're covering the US as a whole. And I want you all, if you can speak to also how you all cover the US as a whole, and maybe how broad that you can be, or maybe you're pulling somebody else in as needed, and you can share how you're willing to do that. I think that's super important for a lot of our processors.
Well, I can go first, and then Alyssa, turn it to you. But I just described to you how we're going to have a reach that sits across the whole US. On the other financing institution that's a part of the farm credit system, we are already connected to all of them, no matter where they are, including in Alaska and Hawaii. So it's just they're everywhere. So we're everywhere. Now, does that mean physically Janie is going to have an office and staff in every place? No, that would be silly, and it would take up a lot of money. So no. So, but the reality is, through this medium, we can all talk to each other anyway. So that really doesn't matter. But that piece of our puzzle is easy for me because we're hooking into a national system that already exists. But it's important for us as NAFS to actually hook up also with people like Alyssa, who have her own networks that they've built. And then together we just amplify and leverage that national. We can get in every nook and cranny, to me, Alyssa.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and same with Steward. So we are, we work across the US, we've made loans in a couple dozen states, coast to coast, have a lot in the Pacific Northwest, kind of in the Western watersheds, Columbia watershed. But also, we're looking at projects a couple projects working on in the Midwest right now, on the East Coast. So kind of all across. We are also, we're a small team that we are actually dispersed throughout the US. There's about 8 Steward employees. And we very much rely on folks like the Flower Hill Institute and other, just like as the web grows, as we do more and more of these processing projects, identifying regionally, okay, here's people that we can tap on the ground that can go help walk this potential plant that they're going to look at. Like, Steward, we're working across, we do a lot of processing projects, but we do a range of projects, and we're certainly not experts. We're not going to pretend to be experts in everything. So we want to be really good at finding the best experts to tap and bring in and make sure that plans are solid. And so, even though Steward is a small team and we're dispersed and we might not necessarily be located on the ground, like Jeannie said, like, this is amazing technology we have where you can really kind of work through a lot of things virtually and then kind of be in person a couple times and get a lot of work done.
Right. Well, let me go ahead, Jenny. Yeah.
I want to add one more thing to that and mention, I actually came off to this call from a call with about 40 native CDFIs. So we also, when we're talking about alternative financing, we also, at least I get up every morning thinking about what are the native CDFIs doing in this space of agriculture, and how are they responding to what is a growing desire, within Indian country to be more, visibly present in all these spaces. There's also rings of native banks out there and credit unions. So how do they fit into this landscape? And we're already talking with all of them. So, that's that. We need to we don't need to limit ourselves right now. It's not smart. We need to actually be as creative and expansive in terms of who we are willing to talk to, who we want to bring into the conversation. And, it can be everything from a small community bank to a credit union to a native CDFI to a non-native CDFI. I don't care. Let's just hustle everybody up, actually get these deals done.
Exactly. And just for those familiar with the acronym CDFI, Community Development Finance Institutions, and they're a great resource. We talked about the geographic breadth of your services, but when we got together to kind of brainstorm this last week, one of the things that both of you emphasized was this isn't just about building a facility. You've got to have the financing that builds a successful business, and touch on that for just a minute. I'll throw it to you first, Alyssa, I guess. Yeah. Since you're each waiting for the other one to jump in first.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, right. So once you get the capital stack actually built for just constructing the plant, I think one of the things we caution, very early on, we have a lot of folks that'll come to us with a project budget. Let's say it starts as a 10 million project budget. It's like, here is our project budget. We found that until owner's rep developer and some other people are brought in, like that your project budget is probably a good $5 to $10 million more than you think it's going to be. So I think one thing that we just kind of talk about early on is like, how do we ground the plan in reality very early on, so we know what the capital stack as a whole needs to look like. And then even, okay, we can get the project built, but then you have a plant to run and you have employees to pay and you have a number of years where you're probably not operating profitably, how do you actually kind of make sure that you're set up for success in that time frame? And a lot of that is capital. But a lot of that is, the three main things that we really kind of focus in on in our diligence and underwriting is throughput, sales, and labor. Where's the throughput? Where are the animals actually coming from to operate the plant? And also not just in the busy season, but all months of the year round. Where are those products then actually being sold? Are you just doing custom processing? Are you creating a direct to consumer brand? What does that look like? What is the sales channels for the actual product being processed? And then labor. It's really hard to find. It's hard work. It's hard to find skilled labor. There's got to be training programs. And so I would say really looking at all of these pieces, and then even things like bookkeeping. We've found, especially some of these vertically integrated plants that are also doing their own direct-to-consumer meat brand, or maybe having a little burger joint, really hard to figure out the books and how all of those entities are related, and making sure we bring in experts that have worked with meat processing businesses before and setting up the books so that you can actually tell what is profitable and what is working, what isn't working. So it kind of goes back to those connection points, and really thinking thoughtfully about, okay, you can build the plant, but then what?
Great.
Yeah, and
Jenny?
Dave, I'm going to jump in here too. And Alyssa did a fantastic job of, so you got me built, now what? Because, you will, I promise you will need to change out equipment at some point along the path. And Chris, I think I remember getting calls in the middle of the night that equipment was going to have to change before you even got the doors open.
Or it doesn't show up when you're trying to be open, there's all kinds of things you have to plan for. Yeah.
Well, and then Chris, I think at one point had to fabricate his own equipment. So, equipment is a big deal in these plants. I'll just tell you straight up, and it ain't cheap. So replacement costs, maintenance costs, all of those things need to be built in. The labor piece, I'm so glad Alyssa, mentioned that these are not unskilled jobs. Everybody who steps inside one of these plants is going to have to be trained like crazy on a whole lot of very specific food safety requirements. And that applies in meat for sure, but it also applies in fruits and vegetables and grains and everything else. It's fish, it doesn't matter. So anytime you're feeding somebody, you're going to have to deal with the food safety kind of infrastructure of technical support that sits up underneath that. For folks, Dave, that are just in the process of taking their dreams and pushing them into reality, the sooner you can actually allocate time to put your head around the food safety piece, the better. And the reason why I say that is, identifying people that can be a part of that first team on the ground is really important, because it's going to take you a little while to actually get them trained up, number one, and kind of, you can't just like grab somebody off the highway and plop them down in a plant. Doesn't work that way. You got to bring them along as you bring yourself along in the plant itself. The other piece of the puzzle is, while you're still putting your capital stack together, you better be thinking about what your business entity choice is. And please don't be a sole proprietor. It's like, oh my God. Unless you're willing to literally have all of your personal assets go down a drain. The reality is that a business entity choice, there's multiple things that you can be, but you've got to get that you've got to have a rational thought around and a plan around why you choose that particular business entity of the several that are out there, because that's the one you're going to be stuck with for a little while in terms of standing the thing up. And there's a lot that goes into that choice of business entity. Some of it is liability issues. Some of it is just ease of formation. Some of it is taxation issues. Some of it is, tax breaks, if you will. there's a lot that goes into why you choose business entity, but you've got to get your head around that. The siting of where you put the plant is terribly important. The environmental reviews that are that you need to be thinking about. And I'm going to say this not because I ran a plant, but because I ran a small business that was in a retail setting. You may know what your market is now, and you may have to pivot. So what's your backup plan? The reality is none of us should be building these plants without a sense of that market and that throughput, and how to get your fingers on it, how to keep it held close so that you have the throughput. But also, what is your backup plan B and C and D for if something happens to who you think your primary market is? And you know that those can change. My husband and I ran a retail fabric outlet, and we overnight had to pivot. We had to pivot after 9/11, but we also had to pivot after Amazon. So, and we hadn't counted on either one of those happening. So it's those kinds of things outside your control really warrant people spending the time necessarily to game that out, if you will, and do a what if, and test yourself against it. That informs a solid business plan to me.
Yeah, and I want to reinforce that. But in the meantime, if you have some questions, please type them in the Q&A. Tim, we've got yours that came in early, and we'll get to it here in just a bit. But yeah, let's get some questions going for Janie and Alyssa. But I think what both of you just talked about, and Chris, you can add on to this too. But Chris and I have been talking to everyone that we work with that the types of projects we're working with are not about producing a 1-pound brick of generic ground beef to go into Kroger or Walmart. And there's a paper that Dr. Sarah Lowe did last year that really talks about, for smaller processors, you've got to have something different. You got to be able to do something, and that's difficult. And so yeah, the financing, you talk about the importance of it, but as financing entities, how do you how do you assess that when they come to you to know whether or not they have something that's going to be viable?
Okay, I'll jump in. Both Janie and I are waiting to see who goes first. Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen, and this is like a soft and squishy, but who is the business owner? Who is the leader? Like, these plants and these businesses are really hard to run. They're complex. You have to think about HACCP plans. You need to think about workers and how do you keep employees. And so I think one of the things that we've found is first of all, like, who is the leader? Who is the team that's actually getting this built? And that is such an important factor. That again, that's not like a hard number or anything, but when Stewart is doing our diligence, especially with these types of projects that they're new businesses, they don't have historical financials, like that leader and looking at projections and seeing the ability to roll with the punches. Things are never going to go perfectly as planned. And so kind of being able to work alongside someone as we're doing diligence and talking through these things very much matters in terms of just what is the leadership and kind of the ethos and plan for the business look like, I think is a really big one. As well as, really Stewart in our diligence process, as I mentioned, we lend across the agricultural space, and we have a knowledge about a lot of things, but not super in-depth about everything. And so we're really looking to connect folks with experts in their area and really trying to put a team around that business leader to make them successful. So just an example, there's a project that we've worked on where, okay, we brought in a retired USDA meat processing inspector to help with facility plans and make sure that the HACCP was good and the plans were good. We then brought in or introduced an accounting team that has worked with many different meat processing businesses to help differentiate and figure out, okay, are the meat sales doing better? Is the custom processing doing better? Helping to really refine that. A project development, bringing in a project development or an owner's rep. Anytime we've kind of found anytime a project of this size, the reality is construction is like a whole nother thing. Like there's all sorts of things in construction that if you don't work in the construction world, you don't even know the right questions to ask. And I am like just dipping my toes in this over the past couple of years. And so we're very much looking at, okay, we need to have an owner's rep, somebody on the client side that is pushing the general contractor to ask the right questions, making sure the budget is actually real so that you don't get halfway through construction and all of a sudden your budget is ballooning. So I think it's about the business leader, and then it's also about kind of the willingness and knowledge of like, okay, one person doesn't know this all. Like it does take a lot of people to put it together, and kind of being open to and being willing to recognize that and build that team of experts to not just get the project built, but then to run it.
You know, I'm gonna harken back, Chris, to the opening of the Quapaw plant. And Quapaw was unusual, Alyssa, because Chris had a significant experience in construction. So, you know, you could see it every time he would open his mouth on that project. You could tell he came fully equipped to deal with anything the construction piece would throw at him. And that kind of project management piece is so important because there's so many little strings that attach to building a processing plant. You know, but the other thing that I always think about and if one of you on the call were to walk into our offices tomorrow, you would probably still be sitting here talking to me at midnight, because I would want to what if till the world looks level. And so I would hope it would be a nice experience for you. But it's important, I think, when you're putting together a processing plant of any kind, for you to really run the numbers in terms of what is the best intelligence that we have around where all of those cattle are, or whatever it is you're wanting to process, right? And honestly, about the best data points we have in the United States is still coming out of NASS, the National Ag Statistical Service, in the ag census. And so, you know, we have kind of a floor of that kind of information there. But if you're planning a plant that's going to require X number of head to move as throughput through the plant in order for you to keep the lights on, I'm going to ask you point blank, where the heck do you think you're getting those from? And have you been talking to, you know, ranchers, producers on the ground, not just in your community, right? But you know, pull your aperture out. Who are you talking to, and who are you making connections with in a broader geography? My gut has always told me in these spaces that if we can actually pull ourselves back out just a tad and look at almost a sub-region, you know, kind of context, then we can create connections between producers that could be throughput and markets, oh, by the way, that would come up underneath any of these plants that are being contemplated and create a more solid foundation. The narrower you are in your aperture, the more shaky you can get if one little thing goes wrong. And that's always been how I've seen the world, Dave. You may see it differently. I don't think so. I think I've been around you enough to know that you have a tendency to see it the way I do. But everyone on the call, I think, just gut check yourself on your geography, not only for your markets, but for your throughput and for your employees even, because, don't limit yourself to just Fayetteville, Arkansas. Well, if I do that, I'm kind of contained here and there's not much I can do if that's all I see, right? But if you pull it back, then you can find partners all over the place, not just in financing, right? But also in just the day-to-day running of the operation and keeping it moving forward. Yes, it's hard. So what? Everything good is hard, I guess. Maybe if everything was easy, we would take it all for granted. This is hard and it's totally worth it. Absolutely worth it. And if we do not do this, then what are we going to do? Because we must do this for the survival of our farmers and ranchers. And if we care about vibrant markets and being able to stay at home in our communities and live and have wonderful lives, then we have to work on this piece of the puzzle. And it's going to be hard, but 100 years ago, it's hard too. So, it's just time to roll up our sleeves and try to make it work, but pull the geography back.
Absolutely. No, a good friend of mine he taught me the term hidden bummer factor. Every project comes with hidden bummer factors, and you got to be able to, navigate through that. Chris, when they talk construction, your eyes lit up. So yeah, just anything you want to add before we start taking some questions?
Yeah, they're definitely, and obviously we bring that to the table as well. Our team here, Dave loves to dive into marketing, and he loves to pull market data out for you all. I love diving into projects, if we're trying to figure out your layouts or your construction costs, or whether you're planning it big enough for what you want to do. We've done this enough times that we can take your goals that you have, or maybe if you have contracts, if you have contracts for a certain amount of throughput, we can help you assess. Are you planning enough space? Are you planning the right equipment? Are you looking at this properly? So I highly encourage you to look at third parties. And even when we talk about business planning, Janie brought it up a little bit. When you think about the business plans, get a third party to help ask the hard questions. We've seen this enough to know as well that the people inside your circle won't always ask the hard questions and maybe won't challenge you enough. But a third party typically will. And as Janie mentioned, if it takes all night to sit down and think about the what ifs and wherefores, you need to think about that, because these hard questions that you get asked might bring up that aha moment that says, yeah, I didn't think about that. And if that happens, I'm in trouble. Another thing that Janie brought up, we talk about equipment. Equipment doesn't last as long as land, and it doesn't last as long as the building. Finance institutions look at equipment differently. And we need to be thinking about that possibly being amortized differently than your land and your buildings. So I wanted to bring that up, but before we started taking questions or closed out. But always know that you could have multiple situations going on with your financing. We have a team that's here to help. All of our team at Flower Hill, all of our team with the Meat and Poultry Processing Technical Assistance Program are available. We have some of our other technical assistance providers. See several from IAC on the call. We have a lot of resources that we can pull together for you all. And again, I know we're covering the almost the entire United States with our call here. We have friends from all over, so we are here to help you. Janie and Alyssa are here to help. Again, we're trying to find connections for you that will find the alternative methods to this hard project that you've taken on. You have a passion to take this project on. You've taken it on already for most of you. And you need partners that are willing to go that extra mile for you. So that's why we're all here. And if you have questions, please let us know.
Yep. So let me, just dive in a couple. So Tim Yarborough was disappointed when he found out early in this program that you and Chris weren't going to write his HACCP plan for him, because he said, are there some sites that are helpful in terms of building a HACCP plan for startups? And I'll just kind of tackle that. First of all, yes, there are. Particularly as a part of our technical assistance network, we have some resources, and particularly the American Association of Meat Processors has got a lot of resources that can help you with that. And in fact, they're building some new resources. We what was it, last week we met Chris and talked about building out and expanding some of the resources they have. So that would be a good start. Secondly, in our resource directory that we have in our website or online toolkit, there are some consultants who then these are paid consultants, but they can be worth every dime. So those are two. But other thoughts or ideas that the rest of you might have?
When we did the Quapaw plant, we used the HACCP group, and they're a group of consultants, but it sounds like they're different than the ones that Alyssa used. What you got to do too is see if you can find consultants in your region. Then your travel costs for them, if you have to hire a consultant, are not so high. But there are folks out there. Dave, what you pointed out is awesome. I will caution against taking, I can't believe I'm going to say this, taking a HACCP plan online and marking out their name and putting in yours. It's not the way it's done.
No,
And they literally have to be tailored to your operation, and they're that specific. So it really does help to have somebody who has, some experience in the space. Don't do what people do when they try to avoid hiring a lawyer to do a will and just cross people's names out. This is an area you're basically building the food safety cradle for the operation. And it's worth the effort to actually dig in, understand why those words are on the page, train your employees to it, but have it built by somebody who actually, has prowess in that area. Alyssa, you probably have other thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have any specific groups that come to my top of mind, but I think to just the point of like, it is worth paying consultant. Like, nobody has access to all the information needed to do this, and it's going to take, that's part of the reason why project budgets are bigger than your super lean budget you build, because it takes money to do this right and to actually set you up for success. So yeah, be willing to, obviously you have to run a lean business and think about the numbers, but there's some things that are worth paying for. And some of those things are, HACCP consultant, if you don't have that on your team, the construction management person, like, pay the money, just build it into the budget, because it's really important.
The other thing that's a part of these plans, the operating plans, basically for the plant as you're running it, you have to think about food defense, and you also have to think about humane handling. And those are two like critical components of the HACCP plans themselves that are like chapters. They aren't that difficult to build, but a lot of people don't think about them separately, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So they are, if you're just getting your head around what this means, the best thing I think you can do is find somebody's HACCP plan and literally read the darn thing from start to finish, so that you can get a lay of the landscape and get a sense of what you're going to need to replicate for your own operation.
Danielle typed in, can you put a link? And it's actually Sarah Lowe, SARAHLOW, and she's at the University of Illinois. And I haven't had a chance to Google and find the link, so we'll send that out later. But I'll do a promo here. Dr. Lowe and myself are going to be on a webinar next Thursday that Meeting Place magazine is sponsoring to have this discussion. And they're framing it as a debate, but I think if you tune in to be looking for a debate, you're going to be disappointed, because I think we're going to have a discussion on the challenges and the resources. So yeah, tune in for that. But we will send you, everybody here will send the link for that paper that she wrote. What is the best way to contact Janie and Alyssa to have further conversation about financing options. And Shelby, I don't know, we might have dropped the ball on this if we don't have a slide with Alyssa and Janie's contact information on there. But
I just put
Janie's
my
typing
email.
hers in right now, and Alyssa will too. But we will also send that out for folks to be able to get in touch with you. So let's see. I thought there was another one, but it kind of disappeared off the screen. So
I send an email out for contact Dave, just so you know, if any of you need assistance direct, you can email Dave or I. It's dcarter@flowerhill.institute or croper@flowerhill.institute. If you need direct contact, or if you want to talk about your project one-on-one, feel free to reach out to us and we'll have a one-on-one call and dive into your project.
yeah, and that was important. I think one of the earlier questions was, how do I just get some assistance with my general business operations? And that's the reason that Secretary Vilsack pulled together this technical assistance network, is they knew that if they were just going to put grants and loan programs out on the street, that was going to be a colossal failure. That what folks needed to have was the technical assistance. So you think about that with the Niche Meat Processing Assistance Network, American Association of Meat Processors, American Meat Science Association, the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, Intertribal Agriculture Council, and Tuskegee University, along with Flowery Hill. That's a really robust network of folks that have got some expertise and the passion to really work with you and make your project successful. So,
And I
that,
would just
yeah.
add, as a lender, if somebody comes to us and hasn't tapped into that resource, it raises a little red flag, because these folks are talking, you guys are talking to so many different projects and are just aggregating all of this knowledge. And so, yeah, just flagging, we've had a couple of folks that we asked, oh, well, have you tapped into these resources? And they're just like, no, I just want to build this plant. And it's like, okay, it's not that simple. So.
And we're free, so there's no reason for people not to reach out.
Exactly.
And we're around through the end of 2026. So, no, I mean, I love to stress to folks that, we'll give you everything we can. The only thing you won't get from us is an invoice. And so, please reach out. So we're kind of coming up to time here.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to respond to one of the comments. I don't know who you got turned down from Farm Credit, because I don't know which office you went into, and I don't know where it was in the actual conversation. But even if you have been turned down by a Farm Credit office, we are going to be regulated inside their system, but we're not a Farm Credit office. We are an other financing institution that has a whole different business approach. We just happen to be nestled in their system with the ability to access their capital pools. But we have the authority to function nationally and do our own thing. So just because you have a client that's been turned down by Farm Credit, I don't know why. And I have to just say that out loud, and let you know that we've got to, just keep talking. Call Alyssa, call me. We can, help you kind of unpack. If there was a weakness in the business plan that you put together, then let's figure that out together and figure out if some other pathway could be identified. I have a quick story I want to tell, Dave. Porter Holder is a friend of mine. He still sits on the Native American Ag Fund board. He was a plaintiff in the Keep Eagle case. Y'all remember that? And he tells the story of not being able to get a loan out of the Farm Service Agency, but walking down the street to Farm Credit. And they pushed his business plan back at him and they said, we can't do the loan right now, but if you fix these 3 things, we can. He went home and he fixed those 3 things, and then he got a loan. That's what you have to be persistent. And I don't know exactly who you talked to. I don't know which office it was, but I never accept no until I've heard it about 40 times. So, and then I think about pivoting. So, we're all going to have to be persistent in getting these things stood up. And, but you and your client also have to be willing to actually say, you know, that part of our approach could use some tweaking, right?
Yeah.
We're all in this together, folks.
And I
Absolutely.
agree, James. That denial that they got could help them from
Exactly.
failing later. So if
Exactly.
somebody identified a weakness, let's fix the weakness. That
Right.
might help your business be successful in the long run. So that's why
Exactly.
we all want to analyze it and keep talking about it. So we don't want to just take no for an answer and move on to the next thing or the next profession. Let's figure out the problem and work through it and talk to more people.
Yep. No, it's all about getting to yes, not just having no. I see Meg Jackson is on the line, so that reminds me I'm going to do a little promo here that in about 2 weeks we're going to have another roundtable to talk about USDA financing programs, and we're really pleased that we're going to have Meg, who's with the Center for Rural Affairs, and she's involved with the network of folks that are administering um, the Meat and Poultry Intermediary Lending Program. But we're also going to have a gentleman uh, from North Avenue Capital. They are a USDA lender, as well as someone from USDA Rural Development with us to talk about that. So be sure and join us for that. But before we sign off, Janie, Alyssa, any final thoughts you might want to share?
Roll up our sleeves.
Do it.
Let's do
Let's
it.
do it. All right. Chris, anything we missed?
No, thank you all for joining. And like I said, many friends and technical assistance inquiries are tuned in today, and we appreciate you all being on with us. And please let us know if we can help you.
And we'll send you the follow-up information with their contact, as well as the link to that paper by Dr. Lowe. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. So have a good day.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.